This is an example of horseshoe theory, the idea that if you go far enough left or far enough right on the linear political spectrum, you end up with ideologies that are paradoxically similar to each other. It's hard to spend much time in online political communities without coming across horseshoe theory. Centrists and moderates particularly like it because it suggests that the further ideas get from their political orientation, the more dangerous they become. But let me tell you something about horseshoe theory that you might not have heard before. It's wrong. Horseshoe theory is a derivative of centrist extremist theory, which was described in an essay by Daniel Bell in the mid-1950s. Bell and a few others are the progenitors of the neoconservative movement in the United States. Summarized, centrist extremist theory assumes that pluralists, or people who are tolerant of differing political ideas, inevitably gravitate towards centrism. Those outside the center are then inherently not interested in pluralism, which pushes them out of the mainstream and marginalizes them politically and economically. This marginalization creates anxiety over social status, which makes them increasingly hysterical, paranoid, and unreasonable, causing them to become even more extreme. Ultimately, these people, whether leaving the center from the right or the left, will resort to violent, dangerous authoritarianism and totalitarianism to remedy that anxiety. Therefore, this theory posits that staying close to the center maintains peace, whereas drifting further from the center leads to chaos and the loss of liberty. So you see why centrists are so attracted to it. Centrist extremist theory, and horseshoe theory along with it, has maintained favor among the mainstream, primarily because it promotes horse race politics, which is preferred by the media, and because it promotes the status quo, which is preferred by people in power. However, it has been thoroughly discredited by political scientists, theorists, and sociologists. The top-line failings of horseshoe theory are predictable. It oversimplifies the political landscape, as does the left-right linear political spectrum it depends on. It's also empirically incorrect. A study of political groups in several countries by a team led by Paul H.P. Hanel found that the values of people with more extreme left or right-wing ideas were more different to each other than those with moderate views, with that difference increasing the further left and right they went. Horseshoe theory would suggest that they would eventually become less different. In a similar study, Alon Van Heel found that left-wing groups remain significantly less likely to focus on tradition, individualism, and xenophobia than their right-wing counterparts, regardless of how far left they were, which indicates fundamentally different value sets instead of an eventual convergence at the extreme. Ultimately, political ideologies are more complicated than simply left or right, and they concern much more than just economic policy, which US politics tends to fixate on. They're also more complicated than what something like the political compass would suggest, which simply plots policy positions on an XY axis between authoritarianism, libertarianism, left and right. Authoritarianism isn't just the opposite of libertarianism, it's a fundamentally and independently different set of principles. Communism isn't just the opposite of capitalism, it's a fundamentally and independently different set of values. Democratic socialism and social liberalism share more policy positions than, say, Marxism and neoconservatism, but that doesn't necessarily make them subsequent each other on the same continuum. They're still independent ideologies based on their own sets of values and principles. Most importantly, don't make the mistake of following horseshoe theory into the argument to moderation fallacy, or the idea that the best answer is always a compromise between opposing positions. A commitment to neutrality gives us what Thomas Nagel called the view from nowhere. It's tempting to think that ideas are more objective the more divorced they are from any individual's personal experience. However, that exercise also makes them less useful. Unfortunately, it's harder to find good answers than just looking at two people who disagree and compromising somewhere in the middle. The difference between right and wrong isn't just somewhere in the middle. It's in the careful consideration of our lived experiences with each other.